15 years ago, sisters Emily and Sarah Thompson vanished on their walk to school, leaving Oak Ridge with nothing but silence and grief. A shadowy figure and the chilling secrets hidden in a teacher's attic suggested their disappearance was no accident. But when Detective Mark Sullivan uncovered the girls' drawings and long-forgotten memories resurfaced, the case took a turn no one could have foreseen. And just listen to how shocking the twist in this drama turned out to be, and why justice ultimately prevailed. The sun was just beginning to rise over the small town of Oak Ridge, casting a warm glow on the streets where children bustled about, their laughter mingling with the crisp morning air. Among them were two sisters, Emily and Sarah Thompson, who were known for their golden hair and radiant smiles. At 12 and 10 years old, respectively, they were inseparable, sharing everything from clothes to secrets, and even dreams of the future. They walked to school together every day, a ritual that seemed as unbreakable as their bond. But on that fateful day 15 years ago, something shattered their routine. Emily and Sarah never made it to school. Instead, they vanished without a trace, leaving behind a community engulfed in confusion and sorrow. Their parents, friends, and neighbors searched tirelessly, plastering the town with flyers that bore the girls' smiling faces. Yet, no one had any answers, and the days turned into weeks, then months, and finally years, with the case growing colder as the memories faded into whispers. In the present day, Oak Ridge had moved on. The disappearance remained a haunting memory, a ghost that lingered in the hearts of the townsfolk. Most had accepted the tragedy as a part of their town's history, a dark chapter that was better left unopened. However, for some, especially the girl's family, the pain remained fresh, a wound that never truly healed. It was on a rainy afternoon, 15 years after their disappearance, that the mystery was stirred anew. Mrs. Gladys Harper, a beloved teacher at Oak Ridge Middle School, was cleaning out her attic when she stumbled upon a dusty old box. Inside, she found a collection of items that made her heart race. Two backpacks, a pair of shoes, and a couple of tattered notebooks. The sight of those familiar items sent shivers down her spine. They belonged to Emily and Sarah. She recognized them instantly. The shock of discovery was palpable. As she held the girls' belongings in her hands, memories of their bright faces flooded back. Mrs. Harper remembered how the sisters were always eager to learn, how they would hang on to her every word. She could still hear their laughter echoing in the classroom. But the joy quickly morphed into guilt. Why had these things been in her attic all this time? Had she unknowingly kept a part of their tragic story hidden away? With trembling hands, she called the local authorities, her heart racing at the thought of what this could mean. Could it be that they had finally found a lead in the case that had long gone cold? As she waited for the police to arrive, a whirlwind of emotions enveloped her. Fear, hope, and a deep-seated compassion for the girls and their grieving family. Detective Mark Sullivan, a seasoned investigator familiar with the case, arrived within the hour. He was a man who had seen too many tragedies, but the Thompson sisters' disappearance had always haunted him. He had been a rookie cop when they vanished, and now, years later, he was still wrestling with the guilt of not being able to bring them home. As Mrs. Harper presented the findings, Detective Sullivan listened intently. The backpacks were still intact, the notebooks filled with the girls' neat handwriting. Emily's was decorated with stickers of unicorns and rainbows, while Sarah's was adorned with doodles of flowers and hearts. Each item felt like a puzzle piece that could finally shed light on the mystery. "Do you remember anything about the day they disappeared?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with urgency. Mrs. Harper's mind raced as she recalled that dark day. They were so excited to go to school. "I remember them running down the street, hand in hand, laughing. They never came back. I always thought they'd just gotten lost, or maybe they met someone they shouldn't have." Detective Sullivan finished her sentence, the weight of unspoken possibilities hanging heavy in the air. As they sifted through the belongings, he felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps the notebooks contained clues that could lead them to the truth. He flipped on through the pages, searching for anything that stood out. But they were filled with innocent musings about school projects, dreams of becoming veterinarians, and plans for a summer camping trip. His heart sank as he realized that these were the thoughts of two girls who had no idea about the darkness that awaited them. "Maybe we should take these to the family," Mrs. Harper suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. They deserve to know what we found. Detective Sullivan nodded, knowing that it was the right thing to do, but guilt gnawed at him. What if this only reopened old wounds? The Thompson family had endured enough heartbreak. Still, they deserved to know, to have some closure, even if it meant revisiting their pain. As they drove to the Thompson family home, Sullivan's mind raced with questions. What had happened to Emily and Sarah? Were they alive? Where had they been all these years? And more importantly, why had their belongings been hidden away in Mrs. Harper's attic? The answers felt tantalizingly close, yet frustratingly out of reach. When they arrived at the Thompson residence, the air was thick with emotion. The house had a forlorn look about it, a place that once echoed with laughter, but now felt like a tomb of lost memories. Sullivan knocked on the door, his heart pounding. He braced himself for the confrontation with grief. Mrs. Thompson answered, her eyes filled with cautious hope. She had spent years waiting for news, for any sign of her daughters. As Sullivan and Mrs. Harper explained the discovery, her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then finally to a deep, aching sorrow. Why? Why did it take so long? She whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Sullivan felt the weight of her pain and guilt. We don't know yet, but we promise to find out what happened. We'll do everything we can to bring you the truth. As he spoke, he felt a flicker of determination ignite within him. No longer would the girl's story remain a mystery. He would uncover the truth no matter the cost, and perhaps in doing so, he could finally help the Thompson family find the closure they so desperately needed. As the sun set behind the horizon, casting long shadows across the town, the journey towards uncovering the truth had begun. But with every step forward, the haunting questions lingered, promising that the road ahead would be fraught with unexpected twists and revelations. The rain continued to fall steadily in Oak Ridge, a relentless drumming against the pavement that mirrored the turmoil in Mrs. Thompson's heart. She stood at the window, tracing the outline of the heavy clouds with her finger, as if she could erase the grayness with a simple touch. The weight of the past pressed upon her, the memories of her daughters swirling around her like the mist outside. 15 years had passed since that fateful morning, yet the void they left was as palpable as ever. Across the room, Detective Mark Sullivan shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his eyes darting between the framed photographs on the mantel and the woman before him. Mrs. Thompson's face, once radiant with joy, had become etched with sorrow, the lines of grief deepening with each year. He felt the familiar pang of guilt twist in his stomach. He had been part of the team that failed to find her daughters, and now here he was, offering remnants of their lives back to her, pieces of a puzzle that had long remained unsolved. Mrs. Thompson, he began, his voice low and steady. We found their things in Mrs. Harper's attic. We thought it might help to... She turned to him, her eyes glistening like wet stones, filled with a mixture of hope and despair. Help! How could anything help at this point? The tremor in her voice betrayed the strength she had built over the years. What do you think I can do with their old backpacks and notebooks? They're just memories wrapped in dust. Sullivan leaned forward, his expression earnest. These items might lead us to answers. We need to look at everything, even the smallest details. Your daughters were vibrant, filled with dreams. There might be something in their writings, something they shared with each other that could give us a clue. For a moment, silence enveloped the room, punctuated only by the soft patter of raindrops against the window. Mrs. Thompson's gaze drifted back to the photographs. In one, Emily and Sarah stood side by side, their faces aglow with laughter, the sunlight capturing the essence of their youth. You're right, she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. But I don't know if I can bear it. Sullivan reached out, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. We'll go through it together. You're not alone in this, Mrs. Thompson. We're here to help. She nodded slowly, the weight of his words settling over her, like a fragile blanket. The detective had always been compassionate, his empathy woven into the fabric of his character. Yet the thought of revisiting those memories felt like opening a wound that had never truly healed. Let's take a look then, she said, her voice steadier now, bracing herself for the journey into the past. Later that afternoon, they gathered in the small living room, the rain still pouring outside, casting an air of solemnity over the proceedings. Mrs. Harper had joined them, her presence a soothing balm amidst the tension. She had brought a cardboard box filled with the sisters' belongings, the flaps worn and creased as if they too had aged in the shadows of the attic. As she opened the box, the scent of old paper and fabric wafted into the air, stirring a deep nostalgia. The first item Mrs. Harper pulled out was Emily's backpack, bright blue with a faded butterfly patch sewn on the front. It was heavy with the weight of memories. Emily loved butterflies, Mrs. Harper said gently, her voice thick with emotion. She used to say they were a symbol of freedom, of transformation. Mrs. Thompson reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing against the fabric. She always wanted to be a scientist. I remember her talking about studying them in the wild. A sad smile flickered across her face. She was so curious about the world. Sullivan watched as Mrs. Thompson's expression shifted, the warmth of memory mingling with the chill of loss. He felt compelled to press onward, knowing that each item could be a key to unlocking the mystery. Let's see what else is in there. Next came Sarah's notebook, its cover embellished with doodles and vibrant colors. As Mrs. Harper flipped it open, the pages revealed a treasure trove of the young girl's thoughts and dreams. "Look at this," Mrs. Harper said, her voice a mix of wonder and sorrow. She wrote about wanting to be an artist. Mrs. Thompson's heart tightened. She used to paint the most beautiful landscapes. She had such a vivid imagination. Sullivan leaned closer, scanning the pages filled with swirling letters and childlike sketches. One entry caught his eye, the words written in a hurried scrawl. Asterisk. I wish I could fly away like a bird. I want to see the world from above, away from all the shadows. Asterisk. What do you think she meant by shadows? He asked, sharing the page with the others. Mrs. Thompson frowned, deep in thought. I don't know. Maybe it was just something she wrote. Kids often write things without thinking too deeply about them. But Sullivan felt a tug of something deeper, a resonance that stirred unease within him. Or maybe it was a reflection of how she felt at the time. It's possible they sensed something was wrong, something dark looming over them. Mrs. Harper nodded, her brow furrowing. It's true that children often pick up on things that adults overlook. The town was different back then. There were whispers, fears that hung in the air. I remember the tension among the parents, the way they started keeping their children close. Mrs. Thompson's eyes glazed over at the memories, the past rushing back like a tidal wave. I thought we were safe in Oak Ridge, a small town where nothing ever happened. But that morning, her voice trailed off, the shadows of that day creeping back into her mind. Sullivan felt the atmosphere shift, thickening with unspoken fears. What if there were signs, clues that we missed? What if the girls knew something? Stop, Mrs. Thompson said sharply, a flicker of anger igniting in her chest. Don't say things like that. They were just kids, innocent and full of life. They didn't deserve any of this. I understand, Sullivan replied, his tone gentle but firm. But we have to explore every possibility. It's the only way we can find the truth. The room fell silent again, the somber weight of their conversation pressing down on them. Mrs. Harper began to sift through the box again, her fingers trembling slightly. There's more, she said, revealing a small, tattered sketchbook tucked away in the corner. As she opened it, they were greeted with a series of drawings, scenes of their neighborhood, the school, and whimsical creatures. But there, on the final page, was a drawing that sent a chill down Sullivan's spine. It depicted a dark figure looming over the sisters, their faces turned away, expressions of fear etched into the lines. What is this? Mrs. Thompson breathed, her hand flying to cover her mouth. I don't know, Sullivan replied, his heart racing. But it looks like they were afraid of something or someone. Mrs. Harper's eyes widened. Emily and Sarah were imaginative, but this feels different. It's unsettling. Mrs. Thompson felt the walls of her world closing in, her breath quickening. You don't think? Sullivan's gaze was steady, filled with a resolve that ignited a flicker of hope in the darkest corners of her heart. We need to figure out who this figure is. If they were afraid, we have to understand why. It could lead us to answers. As the rain continued to pour outside, the storm within the room deepened. The attic's secrets had begun to unravel, and with each discovery, the shadows of the past loomed larger. But one thing was clear. The search for Emily and Sarah Thompson was far from over. Together they would venture into the heart of darkness, determined to uncover the truth and reclaim the light that had been stolen from them so many years ago. The sun hung low in the overcast sky, casting a muted light over Oak Ridge. The air felt thick with the scent of impending rain, a somber prelude to the emotional storm brewing within the Thompson household. Mrs. Harper and Detective Sullivan stood at the threshold of the weathered bungalow, the creaking door a reluctant witness to the passage of time. Mrs. Thompson opened the door, her eyes reflecting a mosaic of emotions: surprise, dread, hope, and a hint of the grief that had long settled in her heart like dust on forgotten memories. She had aged visibly in 15 years, her hair flecked with silver, and deep lines etched around her mouth. Yet there was a flicker of the spirited woman she once was, buried beneath the weight of loss. "Gladys," she said softly, her voice cracking like old wood. "Mark, what brings you here?" "Mrs. Thompson." Mrs. Harper began, her heart aching at the sight of the woman she had once known so well. "We found something in the attic, something that belongs to Emily and Sarah." The mention of the girls' names hung in the air like an uninvited ghost, stirring memories that had long been locked away. Mrs. Thompson's breath caught, and she stepped back, inviting them into the dimly lit living room. The walls were adorned with faded photographs, capturing moments of laughter and innocence before the world had turned cruel. As they settled on the worn couch, a silence enveloped them, punctuated only by the soft patter of rain beginning to fall against the windows. It was a sound that echoed the sorrow within, a reminder of the storm that had lingered in Mrs. Thompson's heart since that fateful day. "We found their backpacks," Detective Sullivan said, his voice steady but laced with the weight of his own memories. "And some drawings." Mrs. Thompson's eyes widened, a mix of hope and despair swirling within their depths. "Drawings? What kind of drawings?" Mrs. Harper leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. There was one in particular, a drawing of a dark figure. It seemed to trouble them, almost like they sensed something was wrong. The mention of the drawing sent a shiver through Mrs. Thompson. The girls had always been so imaginative, their sketches filled with whimsical creatures and vibrant landscapes. But a dark figure. It felt like a shadow cast over their childhood, a foreboding that had gone unnoticed. "Do you think they knew something?" Mrs. Thompson's voice trembled. "Did they sense danger?" Detective Sullivan exchanged a glance with Mrs. Harper, a silent agreement passing between them. "We need to understand what they were feeling. Maybe it can help us piece together what happened." Mrs. Thompson nodded slowly, her resolve hardening amidst the swirling emotions. "I want to see the drawing. I need to understand what they were trying to tell me." Mrs. Harper retrieved the sketch from her bag and handed it to Mrs. Thompson, who took it with trembling hands, her breath hitching as she studied the lines. The figure was dark and formless, a silhouette that seemed to loom larger than life, surrounded by chaotic strokes that suggested turmoil. Beneath it, the words "Help us" were scribbled in a child's handwriting, a haunting plea echoing through the years. Tears sprang to Mrs. Thompson's eyes as she traced the edges of the paper with her fingertips. "They were scared," she whispered. "They must have felt something was wrong." Detective Sullivan leaned forward, his expression serious. "Mrs. Thompson, we need to explore every possibility. This drawing might be a clue. It's crucial we find out if anyone in the community saw anything unusual that day." She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, a flicker of determination igniting within her. "I'll do whatever it takes to find out what happened to my girls." As the rain intensified, a heavy silence fell over the room, thick with unspoken fears and buried memories. The past had a way of creeping back into the present, and Mrs. Thompson felt the weight of it pressing down on her chest. The search for answers had begun, but the path ahead was shrouded in darkness. Days turned into weeks, and the investigation unfolded like a slow-moving tide, pulling at the hearts of the townsfolk. Detective Sullivan and Mrs. Harper became fixtures in Mrs. Thompson's life, frequently returning to discuss the progress of their search. They pored over old interviews, combed through archives, and revisited the scene where the girls had vanished. Each conversation unearthed more fragments of the past, but with every lead came new questions. The community's memories of that day were murky. It was as if a thick fog had settled over Oak Ridge, obscuring the truth. One afternoon, as the clock ticked toward dusk, Mrs. Harper, feeling the weight of the investigation bear down on her, suggested they visit the school. Maybe we can talk to some of the teachers who were there back then. They might remember something. Detective Sullivan nodded, his brow furrowed in thought. It's worth a shot. The more perspectives we gather, the better. As they arrived at Oak Ridge Elementary, the school appeared almost ghostly in the fading light, its hallways lined with empty lockers and classrooms that had once buzzed with youthful energy. The memories of laughter and learning felt like whispers echoing off the walls, overshadowed by the tragedy that had lingered long after the girl's disappearance. They approached the principal's office, where Mrs. Carla Mitchell greeted them with a wary smile. Detective Sullivan, Mrs. Harper, it's good to see you. I wish it were under better circumstances. Thank you for meeting with us, Mrs. Mitchell, Detective Sullivan said, his tone professional yet empathetic. We want to talk to you about the day Emily and Sarah disappeared. Mrs. Mitchell's face paled, the memories etched in her features. It was a terrible day. I remember it vividly. The whole community was devastated. Mrs. Harper leaned in, her voice gentle. Were there any unusual occurrences that morning? Anything that stood out? The principal frowned in concentration, her fingers nervously tapping on her desk. I remember the weather being strange, overcast and threatening rain. And there was a man. I didn't think much of it at the time, but he was loitering near the school entrance. He seemed out of place. Detective Sullivan's interest piqued. What did he look like? Mrs. Mitchell hesitated, her brow furrowing as she searched her memory. He was tall, wearing a dark coat. I thought he might have been waiting for someone, but I didn't catch his face. It was busy that morning, parents dropping off their kids, and I didn't pay him much attention. Did you report it? Mrs. Harper asked, her voice a soft plea for clarity. No, she admitted, shame creeping into her tone. I assumed he was harmless. But now I wish I had said something. Any details you can remember might help us, Detective Sullivan urged. Did you see him interacting with the girls at all? No, I didn't see him near them. He was just there, watching, she said, her voice trembling at the memory. It's haunting to think about now. As they left the principal's office, Mrs. Harper felt a sense of urgency settling over her. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly beginning to fit together, but they were still missing vital parts. The dark figure in the drawing haunted her thoughts, intertwining with the shadowy man Mrs. Mitchell had described. Detective, we need to find out if anyone else saw this man, Mrs. Harper said, her heart racing. He might be the key to understanding what happened that day. Agreed, he replied, determination flashing in his eyes. But we'll need to dig deeper. We might have to reach out to the community more broadly. As they stepped outside, the rain began to fall in earnest, each drop a reminder of the sorrow that had settled over Oak Ridge. The streets glistened under the gray sky, reflecting the weight of their burdens. The investigation had taken on a life of its own, and with every discovery, the ghosts of the past grew louder, demanding to be heard. Together they would confront the darkness, one step at a time in search of the truth that had eluded them for far too long. The rain fell in relentless sheets, each drop a reminder of the past as it pelted the windows of Mrs. Gladys Harper's cozy home. Inside, the air was thick with unspoken words and lingering memories. Mrs. Thompson sat on the edge of an old floral-patterned armchair, her fingers absently tracing the worn upholstery. The attic's discovery had reignited the embers of her grief, and now, as she looked around the room, she felt the weight of 1,000 unshed tears pressing against her chest. Detective Mark Sullivan leaned against the mantelpiece, arms crossed, his brow furrowed in concentration. The remnants of the sisters' childhood lay scattered across the living room table, notebooks, frayed photographs, and the drawing that had unsettled them all. He caught Mrs. Thompson's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. They were both grappling with the unfathomable. How could two vibrant girls simply vanish without a trace? I don't remember them being afraid, Mrs. Thompson finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. They were always so full of life, so carefree. Sullivan nodded, recalling the stories he had heard over the years. Tales of laughter echoing down the streets of Oak Ridge, of impromptu adventures in the woods behind their home. Children often sense things we don't, he said, his tone gentle yet firm. Perhaps they felt something that day. A presence, an intuition. The drawing, It's troubling. Mrs. Thompson swallowed hard, her throat tightening as she thought of the dark figure looming over Emily and Sarah in the sketch. The sketch was no mere figment of imagination. It felt like a warning, a shadow of something sinister that had trailed them on their last walk to school. We need to find out more about that man Carla mentioned, well, she insisted, a flicker of determination igniting within her. If he was near the school, he could be connected. Sullivan uncrossed his arms, straightening. I agree. I'll follow up with Carla again. Maybe she remembers more about that morning. He hesitated, weighing his words carefully. And we should talk to some of the other teachers. There may be things they overlooked, things they didn't think were important back then. Mrs. Harper, who had been quietly observing the exchange, leaned forward, her eyes wide with concern. You think he could have been involved? After all these years? It's possible, Sullivan replied, his voice steady but his heart heavy. People don't change overnight. If he was a threat then, he could still be one now. Does Miss Thompson shivered, the thought of a predator lurking in their midst chilling her to the bone. Can you find him? If he's still around, we need to know. I'll do everything I can, Sullivan promised, already envisioning the steps he would take. The rain continued to drum against the roof, a steady rhythm that mirrored the urgency in his heart. As Sullivan prepared to leave, Mrs. Harper stood and placed a comforting hand on Mrs. Thompson's shoulder. You're not alone in this, she said softly. We'll uncover the truth together. The three of them shared a moment of solidarity, a fragile thread woven through shared grief and hope. Outside, the downpour intensified, but within the cozy living room, a flicker of determination began to grow, illuminating the path forward. The next day dawned with a heavy fog hanging over Oak Ridge, obscuring the familiar streets and casting the town in an eerie silence. Sullivan drove slowly down Maple Street, his mind racing with thoughts of Emily and Sarah. He had spent the night poring over old case files, searching for clues, anything that could point towards a resolution. He parked outside the school, the old brick building looming like a guardian of faded memories. The bell rang, summoning children to their classrooms, laughter spilling into the air like music. Sullivan stepped inside, a sense of nostalgia washing over him. The walls still bore the marks of youthful exuberance, yet they felt heavy with sorrow, the weight of unresolved histories hanging in the air. Mrs. Carla Mitchell was in her office, surrounded by stacks of papers and the faint scent of fresh coffee. She looked up as Sullivan entered, her expression shifting from surprise to concern. Detective Sullivan, she said, her voice tinged with the burden of the past. It's been a long time. I know. I'm sorry to bring this back up, but I need to ask you some questions about that day. The day Emily and Sarah disappeared, he replied, taking a seat across from her. Mrs. Mitchell's face paled, the memories clearly rushing back. I've thought about it often, she admitted, her hands trembling slightly. I can't shake the feeling that I missed something important. Can you tell me again about the man you saw? Sullivan urged gently. Every detail matters. She took a deep breath, her eyes drifting to the window, where the fog clung to the glass like a haunting specter. He was just there. I remember thinking it was strange because he stood too close to the school entrance, watching the children arrive. It felt wrong, like he didn't belong. Did you get a good look at him? Sullivan pressed, sensing the urgency in her words. She shook her head, frustration creeping into her voice. No, just a glimpse. He had dark hair, maybe a beard, but what struck me most was the way he shifted his gaze, almost like he was waiting for someone. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was busy preparing for the day. Sullivan felt a chill run down his spine. Did he say anything? Did you ever report it? No, I didn't think it was serious. I didn't want to cause a panic among the parents, she confessed, her voice cracking. I wish I had. Maybe it could have changed everything. Do you remember any other teachers or parents mentioning him? Sullivan asked, his mind racing with possibilities. She nodded slowly, a flicker of recognition igniting in her eyes. There was a father who mentioned seeing a man hanging around the school a few weeks before the girls disappeared. He thought it was odd, too. I remember him saying it felt like the man was watching the children. I never linked it to the girls until now. Do you remember who he was? Sullivan felt a surge of hope. I think it was Mr. Anderson, but I can check the records if you need, she offered. He was quite protective of his daughter, always keeping a close eye on her. Please do, Sullivan replied, his heart pounding with renewed purpose. I need to find him. As he left the school, Sullivan felt the fog begin to lift, both outside and within. Each revelation, each connection, pulled him closer to the truth, and yet the shadows still loomed. What if this man was still out there, perhaps still watching? The thought sent a shiver down his spine, and he quickened his pace toward the car. Back at Mrs. Harper's home, Mrs. Thompson sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her heart racing as she awaited Sullivan's return. The rain had finally ceased, yet the air remained thick with tension. Each creak of the old house echoed like a heartbeat, reminding her of the silence that had filled her life since that fateful day. Mrs. Harper entered the room, her face a mix of hope and worry. Did you hear anything? Not yet, Mrs. Thompson replied, her voice shaky. But I feel like we're on the verge of something. I can feel it. Just then the door swung open and Sullivan stepped inside, a determined glint in his eyes. I spoke with Mrs. Mitchell. There's a lead, another parent who might have seen that man. Mrs. Thompson leaned forward, her breath catching in her throat. What do we do next? We find Mr. Anderson, Sullivan stated firmly. He may have seen something that could finally give us the answers we've been searching for. As they shared this moment of resolve, the weight of the past felt lighter, the shadows receding just enough to allow a glimmer of hope to shine through. They were no longer just remembering Emily and Sarah. They were actively seeking the truth, reclaiming the narrative that had long been shrouded in darkness. Together they would uncover what had been lost, even if it meant unearthing the deepest secrets of Oak Ridge. The rain fell in heavy sheets on the town of Oak Ridge, each drop a muted echo of sorrow that had seeped into the hearts of its residents. The streets glistened with a sheen of water, reflecting the gray clouds above, while the familiar scent of damp earth filled the air, mingling with the bittersweet memories of the past. Inside the Thompson home, the atmosphere felt thick with anticipation, a weighty silence that hung between Mrs. Thompson, Mrs. Harper, and Detective Sullivan as they gathered around the kitchen table, their minds entwined in thoughts of Emily and Sarah. Mrs. Thompson clutched a steaming mug of tea, her hands trembling slightly as she gazed out the window. 15 years, she whispered, her voice barely rising above the sound of the rain. 15 years and still no answers. Mrs. Harper reached out, placing a comforting hand on Mrs. Thompson's shoulder. We're getting closer, Helen. We have to believe that. She felt the warmth of her friend beneath her touch, but it was overshadowed by the chill of uncertainty that gripped them all. Detective Sullivan leaned forward, his brow furrowed in concentration. The more pieces we gather, the clearer the picture becomes. We need to speak to Mr. Anderson again. His recollections might hold the key to unlocking the truth. He hesitated, choosing his words with care. We can't afford to overlook anything. Mrs. Thompson nodded, her heart flickering with a mix of hope and dread. What if he knows something we don't? Then we'll finally have a lead, Sullivan replied, his voice steady yet laced with the weight of responsibility. The trio made their way to the Anderson residence, the rain now a relentless curtain that blurred the world outside. As they approached the familiar house, Mrs. Thompson felt a wave of nostalgia wash over her. The Andersons had always been friendly neighbors, their laughter ringing through the air during summer barbecues and winter festivities. But the laughter had faded, replaced by an unspoken tension that lingered in the aftermath of the girl's disappearance. Sullivan knocked on the door, the sound muffled by the rain. After a moment, Mr. Anderson appeared, his expression shifting from surprise to wariness. Detective Sullivan, he greeted, stepping aside to let them in. Mrs. Harper, Mrs. Thompson, what brings you here? Thank you for seeing us, Mr. Anderson, Sullivan said, his tone respectful yet firm. We need to ask you a few more questions about the day Emily and Sarah went missing. Inside, the living room felt small and dimly lit, shadows dancing along the walls as the rain continued to pelt the windows. Mr. Anderson motioned for them to sit, his face betraying a hint of discomfort. I thought we had covered everything last time, he said, his voice low. Mrs. Thompson's heart raced as she spoke. I understand this is difficult, But any detail, no matter how insignificant it may seem, could help us. Mr. Anderson shifted in his seat, his gaze flickering to the window as if searching for the right words among the raindrops. I still remember that day vividly. I was working in the yard when I saw the girls walking to school. They were laughing and playing, just like any other morning. But then, he paused, swallowing hard. I noticed a man standing near the corner, watching them. I thought it was strange, but I didn't think much of it at the time. What did he look like? Sullivan pressed, leaning forward. Mr. Anderson hesitated, his brow furrowing in concentration. He was tall, dressed in dark clothing. I couldn't see his face clearly, but something about him felt off. I remember thinking he didn't belong there. Did you see where he went? Mrs. Harper asked, her voice gentle yet insistent. No, Mr. Anderson replied, shaking his head. I was busy and didn't think to pay him more attention. It wasn't until later that I realized he might have been connected to their disappearance. An uncomfortable silence settled in the room. Mrs. Thompson felt the pain of regret slice through her. If only we had all acted sooner, she murmured. Sullivan's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Do you remember anything else about that day? Any other details that seemed odd? Mr. Anderson frowned, his fingers tapping nervously against the armrest. There was something about the way he moved, like he was waiting for them. I dismissed it at the time, but now, he trailed off, guilt etched across his features. Mrs. Harper leaned in closer. It's not too late to help us, Mr. Anderson. If there's anything else you can think of, anything at all, please share it. The man's eyes darted away, a flicker of conflict crossing his face. There's one more thing. After I saw the man, I went inside and didn't think about it again until the news broke. But I remember hearing a car engine, a loud one, like it was revving up. I didn't think it was related, but do you recall what kind of car? Sullivan asked urgently. Mr. Anderson shook his head. No, I just remember the noise. It felt out of place. As the conversation wound down, Mrs. Thompson felt the weight of the past pressing down upon her. Each clue they uncovered was a breadcrumb leading deeper into the forest of grief, where she feared that they might get lost. Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Anderson, Sullivan said, rising from his seat. We'll follow up on this information. If you remember anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out. As they stepped back into the rain, Mrs. Thompson glanced back at the Anderson house, a mixture of gratitude and sadness washing over her. Do you think we're any closer to finding them? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sullivan paused, considering her words. Every detail counts, Helen. We just need to piece them together. The three of them walked back to the car, where the rain had transformed into a soft drizzle. Inside, the atmosphere felt heavy with unspoken thoughts. Mrs. Harper turned to Mrs. Thompson, her eyes filled with compassion. You're stronger than you know, Helen. It's not easy to relive this, but each step brings us closer. Mrs. Thompson nodded, but the knot in her stomach tightened. I just want to find them. I need to know what happened. As they drove through the rain-soaked streets, the world outside blurred into a watercolor of color and emotion, each drop a reminder of the sisters' absence. The town felt haunted, every corner a whisper of what had been lost, every shadow a reminder of the darkness that lingered. When they arrived back at the Thompson home, Mrs. Thompson felt a sudden chill as she stepped inside. The familiar scent of home, once comforting, now felt tainted by the weight of unresolved grief. She wandered into the living room, her gaze landing on the framed photographs of her daughters that adorned the mantelpiece. They were vibrant and full of life, a stark contrast to the silence that enveloped the house. Sullivan followed her gaze, his heart heavy with the burden of her sorrow. We'll find them, Helen, I promise. She turned to him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. What if we don't? What if we're too late? We won't be, he said, determination etched across his features. I've seen too many cases like this, and there's always a thread to pull. We just need to be patient. As the rain continued to fall outside, Mrs. Thompson felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. The path ahead was shrouded in darkness, but she believed that somewhere, somehow, the truth awaited them. With a resolve that felt fragile yet defiant, she whispered to the photographs, I will find you, my sweet girls. I will bring you home. And in that moment, the rain began to ease as if the heavens themselves were acknowledging her vow. The rain drizzled against the windows of Mrs. Harper's cozy living room, a soft, melancholic rhythm that mirrored the heavy atmosphere inside. The room, filled with the bittersweet scent of lemon tea, felt both inviting and suffocating. Mrs. Thompson sat on the edge of the faded floral couch, her fingers trembling as they traced the outline of the small, delicate drawing of Emily and Sarah. The colors had faded, but the memory of their laughter echoed in her mind, a haunting melody that refused to fade with time. Detective Sullivan stood by the window, his gaze lost in the gray mist that enveloped Oak Ridge. He had seen this town transform over the years, not always for the better. The vibrant chatter of children had been replaced by an uneasy silence, and the shadows of unanswered questions loomed larger with every passing year. He turned back to the room, his expression somber. "Mrs. Thompson, we need to talk about what we found." Mrs. Harper poured another cup of tea, her hands steady despite the turmoil inside her. She placed it gently in front of Mrs. Thompson, who accepted it with a grateful nod. "The drawing," Mrs. Harper said softly. "It feels like a warning, doesn't it? As if they knew something was coming." Mrs. Thompson's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "They were so young, Gladys. How could they possibly know? I thought we were safe in this town." Sullivan stepped closer, his voice low and measured. "We need to consider all angles. This dark figure in the drawing, it could be a clue. Perhaps someone they knew or someone they didn't. But who would do such a thing?" Mrs. Thompson's voice trembled, the weight of her grief evident in her tone. "I can't bear to think of it." Mrs. Harper exchanged a glance with Sullivan, their mutual understanding of the pain in the room palpable. "We'll find out, Mrs. Thompson. We owe it to them." As the rain continued to patter against the windows, the three of them fell into a contemplative silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The room felt smaller, as though the very walls were closing in, pressing down with the burden of the past. "What about Mr. Anderson?" Mrs. Thompson suddenly asked, breaking the silence. "He mentioned seeing a man near the school. Shouldn't we talk to him again?" Sullivan nodded, his mind racing. "Yes, we need to follow every lead, no matter how small. He might remember something else." Mrs. Harper picked up the drawing again, her eyes scanning the edges and the erratic lines. "We should also consider reaching out to other neighbors, anyone who might have seen something unusual that day. It's been 15 years, but sometimes memories can linger like shadows." The thought of reopening old wounds made Mrs. Thompson's heart ache. "Do you really think they'll remember anything?" Sullivan leaned against the wall, arms crossed, a hint of determination in his gaze. "You'd be surprised what people can recall when prompted. I'll go talk to Mr. Anderson, and we can canvass the neighborhood together. We'll find a way to jog their memories." Mrs. Thompson took a deep breath, steeling herself against the rising tide of emotion. "I'll go with you, Detective. I want to hear what he has to say." As the rain intensified, the trio prepared to leave the comfort of the warm, inviting room and step back into the chill of the outside world. The streets of Oak Ridge were slick with rain, and the once familiar paths now felt foreign and foreboding. They walked in silence, the sound of their footsteps muted against the soaked pavement. The air was thick with the scent of earth and rain, a reminder of nature's resilience even in dark times. Mrs. Thompson glanced at Sullivan, who walked with purpose, his brow furrowed in concentration. He had a way of exuding confidence, and it comforted her, even if only slightly. As they approached Mr. Anderson's house, a neat little cottage nestled at the end of a cul-de-sac, Mrs. Thompson felt her heart race. She had not spoken to him since the day of the disappearance, a time when the world still felt innocent and warm. Now it was a ghost of a memory, tainted by loss. Sullivan knocked on the door, the sound echoing in the stillness of the afternoon. Moments passed before they heard the shuffling of footsteps from within. When the door opened, Mr. Anderson stood there, his face lined with age and worry. He looked as though he had been expecting visitors, but hadn't quite known who they would be. "Detective Sullivan," he acknowledged, his voice a gravelly whisper. "And Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Anderson," Sullivan interrupted gently. "We need to ask you a few questions about that day, if you don't mind." Mr. Anderson's expression shifted from surprise to apprehension. "I suppose I can spare a few minutes." He stepped aside, allowing them to enter his dimly lit living room, cluttered with relics of a life lived deeply but quietly. As they settled into worn armchairs, Mrs. Thompson felt the weight of years pressing down on her. "Mr. Anderson, do you remember anything else about the man you saw near the school? Or the sound of the car?" He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit that seemed to be a lifeline to the past. I, I remember the engine. It was too loud for that time of morning, almost like it was trying to drown out something else. But the man, he was just a shadow. I couldn't see his face clearly. "What did he look like?" Sullivan pressed, his brow furrowing with intensity. Mr. Anderson hesitated, his eyes drifting to the window where the rain continued to fall. "He was tall, I think, but it's hard to say. It was early, and the light wasn't good. I just remember feeling uneasy. I should have said something, done something." Mrs. Thompson's heart sank as she listened. "You couldn't have known, Mr. Anderson. None of us could. But I should have trusted my instincts," he replied, his voice heavy with regret. "I saw them that morning, laughing and running to school. They were just kids, and I let my fear hold me back." Sullivan leaned forward, urgency in his tone. "Did you ever see that man again? Anywhere else in town?" Mr. Anderson shook his head. "No, never. But after that day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened. I stopped going to the school, stopped letting my kids walk anywhere alone. It felt like the town lost its innocence that day." Mrs. Thompson closed her eyes, fighting the tears that threatened to spill over. "We are trying to piece everything together," she whispered, "for Emily and Sarah." "I want to help," Mr. Anderson said, a flicker of resolve igniting in his chest. "If I remember anything else, I'll reach out. I owe it to them. I owe it to you." As they prepared to leave, Sullivan thanked Mr. Anderson for his time, but Mrs. Thompson lingered a moment longer. "If you do remember anything, please, don't hesitate to call," she pleaded, her voice breaking. He nodded solemnly, watching them as they stepped back out into the rain. The air felt heavier now, filled with the weight of unspoken truths and lingering shadows. As they walked back towards Mrs. Harper's house, Sullivan's thoughts raced, piecing together fragments of the past. "We need to look at old police reports, see if there were any other sightings of that man around town. Maybe we can connect the dots." Mrs. Thompson nodded, her heart pounding with a mix of hope and dread. "In the drawing, it has to mean something. Maybe there's more to it than we realize." Sullivan glanced at her, the determination in her eyes igniting a flicker of hope within him. "We'll find the truth, Mrs. Thompson. I promise." The rain continued to fall as they walked, a relentless reminder of the sorrow that had woven itself into the fabric of Oak Ridge. But now, with each step, they felt a stronger sense of purpose. The sisters may have vanished into the shadows, but their memory was alive in the hearts of those who loved them, and they would not rest until the truth was uncovered.